2, 3.
Welcome to the Rapp Report with your host, Andrew Rapp Report, where we provide biblical interpretation and application. This is a ministry of striving for eternity in the Christian podcast community. For more content or to request a speaker for your church, go to strivingforeternity.org. Well, welcome to another edition of the Rapp Report. I'm your host, Andrew Rapp Report. I'm joined by Bud. Bud, how's sunny Florida today?
You know, Andrew, greetings, first of all. Not sunny today, man. It's like 59 degrees. It's raining. It's almost like you're here.
Well, it is sunny outside here. I just don't know the temperature because it's, well, probably too cold to walk outside yet.
Well, you're all cozy indoors, so yeah.
Yeah, well, still got the fireplace going indoors, so I'm waiting to do a fire outside, But
every now and then I'll buy one of those logs, and put in our fireplace, which I don't even know why we really have them in Florida, but it was fun ambiance.
You could just get one of those electric ones that they even give off the electric heat, and it looks like it's a log on fire.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten some of those orange strips of paper and just put it on a fan and laid the fan on its back so it blows up and it looks like those displays in some of the stores you see. Well, you can't go to stores anymore, but you remember when.
that was BC.
Yes, before COVID.
Yeah, people are now going to identify everything as BC and AC, right? Before COVID lockdowns and after. I mean, hey, look, 15 to slow the spread has turned into a full year.
Oh, yeah, it's going to turn into 4 years, probably.
4 years. What would that be tied to, huh? What happens in 4 years?
It's just coincidental.
It's
just the way things happen.
I will say before we get started, this year something didn't happen, Bud. There was no Reason Rally.
Oh.
And for folks that don't know, for the past couple of years, every 4 years, the atheists would get together. I mean, they're not really atheists, but they're suppressors of God. But that's what we should call them. We shouldn't call them atheists. Just call them suppressors of God.
Yeah, suppressing the truth. Yeah, truth suppressors.
Yeah. So the suppressors of the truth, aka atheists, would have this big rally, and they wanted to do it to show the politicians, because they do this in DC, the clout of atheists. The first year they did it, they didn't have that many people show up, and they said it was because it rained. Though the Christians, Striving for Eternity, organized an outreach to the Reason Rally, and we set up open air preachers at every corner around the National Mall, so that there was no way for any of them to get into the rally without passing us and getting tracks. So we covered every corner.
Yep.
I forget how many different, like 16 or 24 different teams that we set up. So we had a couple hundred people there, and they had a couple thousand people. And 4 years later, they were going to show that they were a force to be reckoned with. They were predicting 30,000 people. And so I reached out to Ray Comfort and asked whether he'd come out for it and help us out. And so the most conservative numbers that we heard, and that was a beautiful day, by the way, but the most conservative numbers that we heard was that there were 5,000 people there, of which the Christians were over 1,000. We made up 20% of the Reason Rally. We're the Christians.
I mean, fundamentally, that's the way it should be. If you've rejected God, you've rejected reason. We're the only ones that have truth.
So after that rally, the reason they said they didn't have the 30,000 is because everyone was afraid of those Christians that were going to show up. Now, I will admit, they came out, and what's his name now? The president of the American Atheists, like David Silverstein, he's a Jewish guy. But anyway, he called the police and restricted us. We had to be, basically, we were only allowed to be in an area where there were no people. The irony was that we ended up doing, Ray and his team did some open air. And the irony is that they moved us to do the open air where we were away from people, but they put us up on this hill. And so because we had so many people, all the atheists came over to see what was going on. So it actually worked out better when they moved us. It just didn't work the way they wanted. So they said they I guess they didn't organize it this year. I guess the Christians were a stronger force in proclaiming truth than they were in suppressing it.
Well, yeah, true. They were following the science. Probably.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Because science says nothing. Scientists are the ones that speak. So, Bud, before we get started, I do have to give you an announcement and let you know something. But I'm curious, how did you sleep last night?
It's been an early morning, but pretty well.
Well, I know what would have helped your sleep. The same thing that helps my sleep. What you need is a MyPillow. That's what you need, my friend. Because if you had a MyPillow like I have a MyPillow, you would sleep better. How do I know it? Because, well, I own many MyPillows. In fact, I travel with my MyPillow. When I come to see you and I'm in that hotel, I have a MyPillow with me. And we have now, the Rapp Report podcast has now got a new sponsor, and it is MyPillow. And so we have a promo code. If you want to get a MyPillow, you can call a special number just for us, 1-800-873-0176. I'll repeat that again, 1-800-873-0176, and use promo code SFE for Striving for Eternity, SFE. Or you could just go to mypillow.com and again, use this promo code SFE. So these are pillows that they never go flat. That's the thing I love about them. You can wash them, you could dry them as many times as you want. They maintain their shape. Also, they're made right here in the USA. This is for a limited time. Mike Liddell, who's the owner, is offering the premium MyPillows at the lowest price ever. You can get a queen size premium MyPillow for under $30. It's regularly about $70, so you're saving $40 per pillow. They're also, if you want to get the king size ones, those are only $5 more. If you go to mypillow.com, just click on the radio listener square, use the promo code SFE. You can get other deep discounts on all their other products, including their bed sheets, their mattress topper, their pillows, their towels. They even have bathrobes, but if you want to get yourself a bathrobe. So all of that you can get by calling 1-800-873-0176 and use promo code SFE. We are glad to have MyPillow joining us as a sponsor to basically promote one of the best pillows that are out there, and you're also supporting Striving for Eternity and this podcast when you do so. So go to mypillow.com, click the radio listeners, and use promo code SFA. Thank you very much for supporting them. Also, Bud, I have to show, I have to put some up here. I did this on Apologetics Live, but you sent me something. I really like it. You sent me
Oh, yeah.
I'm a doctor of divinity now. Yeah, I like it. Sir.
Congratulations.
So for folks who listened to the episode we did last on Ravi Zacharias, and we talked about how easy it is to make your own. You make your own. Patreons will see this, and they could see it, or you'd have to go watch the Apologetics Live. But it's basically you downloaded a picture of a diploma from Universal Life Church Seminary. And it says your name here. And so you wrote in permanent marker my name where it says your name here. So
yeah, of course.
I appreciate that. Now I, like Ravi Zacharias, could say I'm a doctor. I don't know if that's a good thing. But I like what Apologetics Live, what our friend Justin Pierce said. He said that because this is a solid frame you got here. And my wife said it would probably cost you more to ship than the frame. And then I said, yeah, but Justin said, yeah, but the frame costs more than the degree.
Oh, wow.
Because I paid nothing for the degree. So
I hate to, congratulations on the doctorate. That's an achievement that will last in your memory till you probably move and take it off the wall and whatever.
Well, I wasn't.
But I was going to tell you, I apologize. That's exciting news on the MyPillow thing. Seriously, my effort to get a sponsorship out of Hasbro with the Mr. Potato Head that got boiled. So congratulations on your success there in sponsorship. Mine's fried.
Oh, that's great. Well, we had a little bit of a different show for you folks today. This is going to be it's kind of a potpourri. We have a bunch of articles that have been just stacking up that we've been wanting to get to for some time, and they're ones where they could probably take a whole show, to be honest, but we're not going to do a whole show on any of them. We're going to try to just tackle as many as we can. And Bud is going to let us know what we're going to start with. We have, I don't know, what is this like? This looks like a dozen and a half articles we have.
Wow. Yeah. Let me see. I printed them out.
Of course, you printed them.
The videos can see it.
So I'm going to let you pick whichever ones you want to start with. And we're just gonna see how many we get through. We may have to do this as a two-parter and do one this week and one next week to finish up, because there's just a lot of things in the news that we want to give a Christian perspective on.
Well, I think the biggest one that there's just so much, but the Equality Act, and particularly now I think this guy Nadler, Jerry Nadler, he's New York. But you're familiar with him because you live up there.
Well, I used to live in New Jersey.
Yeah.
But, I left the communist state of New Jersey and came to a state where I'm allowed to carry guns. And I'm not beat up as much when I don't wear masks and things like that. So you want to start with his?
Well, yeah, let's look at his. Representative Jerry Nadler defends the Equality Act and says, actually, I want to read the whole quote. And this was pretty interesting after hearing a representative speaking against the Equality Act, a guy, Representative Stubbe, I think from Florida. Nadler, what's his name?
That's your state.
That's my state. I don't know the
representatives.
Yeah. But this guy, Jerry Nadler, expressed his dissatisfaction. He said, Mr. Stubbe, if I'm pronouncing that right, what any religious tradition describes as God's will is no concern of this Congress. I think that sums up the next 4 years.
Yeah. Well, the reality is that there's several things we could look at with that. I mean, we're going to have to get into the Equality Act, but my first thought of this claim itself, that God's will has nothing to do with what Congress is doing, shows that he doesn't understand God. He is in government. He's in the place of government that he's in because God allows it. It is God who sets up governments. It's God who uses governments. Many Christians, Bud, think that like Biden getting in office was somehow against God's will. Like we needed Trump, that was God's will. The reality is God uses nations even to teach his own people. People forget this. Read the book of Jeremiah, and you'll see that Jeremiah prophesied that God would use it was a wicked nation, a pagan nation of Babylon, and that they were going to come in and be God's instrument of justice, God's instrument of judgment on the nation of Israel, God's chosen people. God was going to bring this pagan, wicked nation in to bring Israel, his chosen people, into captivity to curb them and cure them of idolatry. And that's exactly what happened. And then when those 70 years were done, God judged Babylon. So God uses nations for his own purposes. He sets up rulers. They're in that place because they're there to serve God's purpose. So that is God's will. So when he says, well, this is not, anything to do with God's will. Well, this is what scripture says, reading from Romans 13. Every person is to be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God.
Wait, say that part again. No
For there
authority?
is no authority. No authority includes, I could be mistaken, but no authority includes, Mr. Nadler, it includes the United States Congress. So every person is to be subject, including Mr. Nadler, every person is to be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist to establish are established by God. Therefore, anyone who resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have oppressed will receive condemnation upon themselves. So this is Romans 13, 1 and 2. It makes it crystal clear that every governing authority does so by God's will. And they're established by God's will. And you obey them or resist them in either opposition to or submission to God's will. So I'm sorry, Mr. Nadler, but Congress is there to do God's bidding. Sometimes God's bidding, as we would see in Romans 1, is to bring judgment on a wicked, sinful nation. And Mr. Nadler, that's what you're part of. He's actually part of God's judgment because this nation has rejected God and his will, and they're in oppression to the ordinance of God. And we have Jerry Nadler as the judgment of God, and he's a judgment upon himself as well. So
very true. You know, and just speaking to that point, it always, I don't want to say amused me, but it always concerned me that evangelicals, which evangelicals have now become really
that word
political
mean?
lobby. Yeah, it's really identified as a political lobby, and certainly not a gospel steward, given the antics that are going on in the visible church. But when the evangelical pack or lobby would get a conservative of any flavor on the ballot elected, it's God's man for the hour. But when it turned south, it's no longer God's man for the hour. No, this man right now in the White House fits the same criteria. He's God's man for the hour. And it is just as you've indicated, because God establishes all authority. It is not accidental. So the point is, as we can amply see judgment.
Yeah, and I think for too many Christians, they don't want to think about judgment. They want a comfortable Christianity.
Yeah. Well, they think that way, I believe, because they don't have an apprehension, first of all, of sovereignty. They profess it, but they don't really think it through to understand the implications of God's sovereignty over all things. You just read it. His authority, or all authorities, are established by him. He is sovereign over all of that. You know, so they fail to apprehend that, and certainly in a spiritual, faithful sense, they fail to apprehend holiness.
So where do you want to go next?
Well, let's talk about the Equality Act a little bit. And there were a number of really helpful articles that I found. I know there are a lot more, but Heritage Foundation has some that are kind of the practical implications from a political and social standpoint. Josh Bice had a great article called The Equality Act and the Cost of Freedom. Gabe Hughes on his website, The Majesty's Men, had one titled "The Equality Act Makes Everyone Potato Heads." But I found one Ken Ham had written, Answers in Genesis, that the Equality Act is set to destroy religious freedom. And I think that's the implication that we're most concerned with. We understand depravity in the culture, and we expect to see where it is going, and what is driving the Equality Act culturally. But the implications for the church, I think, are critical for us to grasp. And I don't know that there is a lot of outrage among Christians. I have talked to a few folks about it. Most of them aren't familiar with it. They're more familiar with the restrictions on, HR1 vote by mail than they are Equality Act, really.
Yeah, and this actually, you mentioned something that I was going to hit on, because this is the thing that's kind of frustrating me, is that everyone seems to be more focused on the political things going on than the religious. The Equality Act is a direct attack on Christianity. That's the goal. It's going to be something that's going to be used to shut down every church and every ministry. You're going to have to have, someone that is LGBT on every board, and an equal number. In California, this is already the case, that even for nonprofits, even Christian charities are going to have a practicing homosexual on the board, at least one, unless they have, if they have 6 members, then they have to have 2 or 3. So to be equal, to be fair. And this is what we're seeing now. Now, the Equality Act itself it is something that is, the argument is to make everything equal. I mean, it always sounds good, doesn't it? We're just making equality. It sounds like a good thing, but it's not equality. It is an attempt to suppress Christian views. Now, you don't see this being used against Muslims, who have a much stronger view against homosexuality.
Yeah.
Christians, what we will do to someone that practices homosexuality is give them the gospel and try to get them to have truth and come to repentance. Muslims will throw you off a building and kill you. Which one is more dangerous?
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just a function of numbers and the sense that America in some way had come out of Judeo-Christian ethic, and not to mention that it's primarily identified with white, cisgendered, self-proclaimed Christians? I mean,
well, I believe what it is.
You think it's just the numbers?
Factors. The number one factor. The number one factor I would say is probably because evil doesn't divide against evil. Yeah, they're on the same side.
Good point.
When you understand Islam, they will work within the political means until they have a majority, and then they will silence those that they disagree with. So there's an aspect where I think that their terrorism has worked, and the Marxists want to use the same kind of terrorism of fear. It's the fear of being canceled, losing your job, things like that, that is driving people now to say, well, we don't want to go against Muslims because we're afraid of them. We don't want to go against the Marxists because we're afraid of them. So it's the same form of, same idea of terrorism. They're using the same playbook, I think. And so they know how the playbook works, and they don't want to, they want as many in their camp as they can. Yeah. But the goal will be silence the Christians, silence the Jewish people. Then when they go to silence the Muslims will rise up. And I've always said this, atheism versus Islam wins, because atheists have nothing to live for other than this life. Muslims are looking at they have a wrong view of it, but they're looking at an eternal life. So they have something beyond this world to fight for. And so the atheists will give up. That's my thinking.
No, I think that's right.
No, when it comes to the comment you made, though, HR1 is this bill about voting, where they want to nationalize the voting and basically make what we had in this past year's election nationwide for all elections. Have the mail-in ballots that worked very well for Democrats to pull off a coup. It was not voter fraud, by the way. It was not, election tampering. It was a coup. Let's call it what it was. We need to stop giving in to the Marxist language and calling it Capitol riots. No, riots are where people were doing for 7 months in the cities. That was riots, when they're burning things down. In Capitol Hill now, we're hearing all the testimony. The FBI has announced they didn't find a single gun. That's not the case in BLM riots. There's footage of the police opening the doors and welcoming people in. There's 36 officers that have been charged with assisting the protesters that day. This was a staged coup. It was staged to make it look like it was an insurrection. The reality is the real insurrection, a proper definition of an insurrection, is when you're trying to take over a country. Well, what do we have for 7 months? People marching the streets, burning the streets, saying, burn it down. We need to start over. We need to overturn this country. That's an insurrection. When they go into city streets and go into an area and they put up barriers and they say, we are a new country. That's what they said with Chop and Chaz. That is an insurrection. And that was supported and funded by the very people that are trying to prosecute what happened on January 6th at the Capitol. Okay. And they go, well, but no one's ever broken into the Capitol. Yes, they have several times before. Within our generation, when Brett Kavanaugh the hearings were going on, they didn't just break in. They went all the way they were standing there during the voting. They were standing there during the hearings. They got all the way in and no one chased out the Senate. They didn't go, the Capitol Police didn't just rush them off. In fact, now that we have the timeline, the police rushed them off on January 6th. They rushed them out before many people were even in the Capitol, almost as if they knew that they were supposed to be there. Could that be the reason the police opened the doors and welcomed them in? Because the protesters weren't actually going in at first until they were welcomed in. And then it was like, oh yeah, look, they're all over the place. There was less than 100 people out of 300,000. That's not the same numbers that we see when we look at what went on with BLM, and we see that there was thousands of people and thousands of people rioting.
Yeah, true. But there is a difference between those two things.
Really?
There is the driving agenda of the culture at the moment, and a large degree of driving agenda in the visible church, the issue of melanin and the oppression. So that validates one and certainly is not applicable in the other.
Well, the thing is that that's not actually true, because there's actually more white people that are marching in Black Lives Matter protests than blacks now. Interesting. Black Lives Matter, the organization, had to take down their goals. Why? Because many African Americans saw that the goals of Black Lives Matter are for the destruction of the black family, of the very things that they know the black communities need: strong family and education. And their goals were to destroy the patriarchal family, to support single mothers, not to get a job or take care of their kids. No, support single mothers that they can go out and protest. It was everything against what they need. And many blacks started to realize that it was many blacks who pulled away. And now you got whites that are going, well, we got to still march.
Well, I understand what you're saying is absolutely true. It is factual. Nevertheless, the power of optics, that's in play.
No, it is the power of gaslighting. What is gaslighting? Gaslighting, we used to, back when Bill Clinton was president, you may have heard the term tell a lie long enough and people will believe it's true. That is what he did. He kept saying the same things over and over, that what he was doing was just in private, and he would, when he was having an affair, things like this, and giving away government secrets to the Chinese. These were not supposed to be big deals. And he told a lie over and over, saying this is just personal relationships, working with the Chinese and giving them satellite technology they didn't have. But the reality is, gaslighting is from a movie where basically what happened was this husband wanted to drive his wife nuts. So what he was doing was they would have back when they had a gas light for lights, he would turn the lights down and tell her that they're bright. And turn it up and say that they were dim. And he would keep doing this until she started to question her own sense of reality. She started to wonder, she couldn't tell now because he kept telling her it was bright when she didn't think it was bright, or wasn't bright when it wasn't. He drove her nuts to where she couldn't trust her own version of reality. That is what gaslighting is. And that's what we have, Bud. What we have is a bunch of people who are trying to, in the media, who are trying to convince all of us that wearing a mask will protect you from a virus that you're using a mask that's not designed for viruses. It even says it on the packaging. This does not protect against viruses. But everyone thinks, well, I got to wear this. There are certain masks that would be more beneficial, but those masks are supposedly not to be used. So following the science, like when we look at the testing of a virus, and we test it and we spin so many cycles that we no longer get valid tests, so everyone's positive when they really aren't. Things like this. So, now all of a sudden Biden's president, we changed the testing cycles. So now we're getting more accurate readings. And what's happening? The virus is coming down, the number of cases worldwide. Yeah, CDC is now using the proper number of cycles to spin for the spinning of the test. Yet many people knew that was a problem before, complained about it, but were shut up. So the reality is it's you tell the lie long enough and people will believe it. And that's really what we have going on. It's the power of gaslighting. And you see the gaslighting in big tech, in the suppression of anything that goes against their narrative, right? They're sitting and saying, oh, you say that there's election fraud? No, that's conspiracy theory. We gotta remove that comment. But then when they want to, and they're actually trying to do this, there's a Republican who is seated in the House of Representatives, won by 22 votes, and the Democrats are still trying to call for an audit to unseat a sitting House of Representatives member with a Democrat after the fact. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, saying to the Supreme Court, arguing that to throw out the cases because Biden's already sitting in office, and so there's no need to go through this and do an audit everywhere. When we already saw in Michigan's already accepted that Trump won Michigan, there's now going to be an audit in Arizona. We'll see what happens there. Pennsylvania, well, that one, they went against the law. That one should have been heard. So there's 3 of the states. The reason they don't want the cases heard is because they're trying to unseat a Republican with a Democrat, but they don't want to unseat Biden with Trump, which is what should end up happening, if we were to do the audit. So that the Equality Act is something, Christians, we're going to have to be watching. We'll probably end up having to do an entire show just on the ramifications of the Equality Act. But when we talk about the Equality Act, there is a problem with some of the Christians and their view of the Equality Act. This is why I think we'll end up having to do a whole show, because there unfortunately are Christians who are trying to support the Equality Act and argue that this is something that Christians should get behind, when the Equality Act is going to be something that will be used to shut down any church that does not support and promote homosexuality.
Yeah, the whole agenda of the LGBT movement, and people need to understand that technically what this does, and this is what just the irony is thick, but the Equality Act essentially is just adding a couple of phrases to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They're adding in sexual orientation as a protected class and gender identity as a protected class. The thing that strikes me, and I'm certainly not intelligent enough to explain this, but what are we doing? We're making objective, concrete law using language and words that will enshrine subjectivism as a legally protected ideology, which itself uses, especially now in the postmodern times, it also uses language and words, but in a non-concrete in very fluid fashion. So we're making a concrete law. We're using what the words mean to protect a group that has no concept of a concrete definition of words. It just struck me as ironic that we're going to do something objectively to legalize subjectivism, contrary to certainly science and contrary to reason. But the implications for Christianity are dire with this. You think it's going to pass? Do you think we're going to see this?
Unfortunately, yeah. This is probably, unless the Senate was to require a 60 vote, it's going to be like just like the stimulus bill that's going to go down party line, and Harris will be the making the difference, and she'll do the tie-breaking vote.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, what they're trying to do is to enforce their way of thinking, their agenda on all of us. And what the Equality Act is going to do is going to legalize and enforce gaslighting. Yeah. It's going to take a whole generation, because they're going to drive this into the schools. And why do I think that this is the number one concern that we should have as Christians? What is my big issue with the Equality Act? And I said, we'll probably do a whole episode on this, but what I see with the Equality Act is this. The Equality Act, the agenda behind it, is to get the country justifying the hatred of Christians. And once they can do that, once they make a scapegoat of one group of people, and people think it's acceptable to hate people for whatever the reason is, you're only one step away to the arrest and killing of mass people. People feel justified to be able to hate Christians right now because of these views that they have, that they say we should have.
Yeah.
And because of that, this is no different than what happened in Nazi Germany. You had someone that to stay in power, he made scapegoats of the Jewish people. And once that started, Hitler could not stop the train he started, because the moment he stopped using the Jewish people as a scapegoat, that's when he didn't have the unity of all the different groups of people. It's no different than in the Arab world, where they all hate Israel for the sake of keeping themselves together. If they stopped hating Israel, they would start warring with one another. Keeps the unity in all those Arab states? Their hatred for Israel. It's no different with Nazi Germany. They hated the Jews. He created a hatred for the Jews so he could keep power. But that has to constantly be escalated until it comes to the mass termination of 6 million Jewish people. This is what we're headed for in this country. It's just not going to be Jewish people, it's going to be Christian, because you're seeing the mass hatred, the encouraging and the indoctrination of mass hatred for a group of people known as Christians, and that will end in their death.
Yeah. The just unthinkable lunacy of being able to go on, a website and order Mein Kampf, but you can't order Dr. Seuss. Now, if you go read a book like The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which you've just referenced, what do you see in the history of Hitler's rise there? Well, one of the things was we've got to get rid of all the propaganda. So you see book burnings. It was only a little step from burning books to burning bodies.
Yep.
This is where it leads.
Correct. Well, let's do one. I want to pick one.
It's your show.
No, I just want to pick one, but I'll do that after this commercial. But what I want to pick up afterwards is the number of executive orders. You sent me an article on the executive orders, and let's tackle that one right after this break.
The good news is Striving for Eternity would love to come to your church to spend 2 days with your folks teaching them biblical hermeneutics. That's right, the art and science of interpreting Scripture. The bad news is somebody attending might be really upset to discover Jeremiah 29:11 should not be their life verse. To learn more, go to strivingforeternity.org to host a Bible interpretation made easy seminar in your area.
All right. You can contact us if you'd like to have one of those seminars. You know, I'm coming down to Florida soon, bud. Maybe we'll be in Florida on May 7th in Orlando area. We'll be at Beulah Baptist Church May 7th and 8th to do a Snatch Them from the Flames seminar. That's in Winter Garden, Florida. Anyone that's in that area, Winter Garden, Florida, you could contact Beulah Baptist Church. And we are going to be doing Justin Peters, myself, Anthony Svestro. Our Snatch Them from the Flames is our discernment conference. It covers topics like interpreting the Bible, sufficiency of Scripture, discerning false teachers, identifying false teachers, and then we do 2 sessions on social justice, giving a history and identifying social justice. So that's going to be May 7th. But you know, who knows? I'm going to be in the area. Maybe we could do a Bible interpretation made easy seminar at your church, bud, in Jacksonville. We should talk to your pastor about that. Hey, Andrew, you're listening. All right. So let's talk about, there's a CNN article that you sent me that was covering the number of Biden executive orders. Okay.
And this is as of
February 25th.
February 25th. Yeah.
And that's important to note because he's writing executive orders at a record pace. And just so people understand, when we're saying a record pace, Joe Biden did 41 executive orders in his first month of office. Now, just as a comparison, because remember, Joe Biden accused Trump, said that Trump was a tyrant and a dictator. The reason he was a tyrant dictator was because of the number of executive orders. The number of executive orders is what he said makes a tyrant. Donald J. Trump averaged 55 executive orders a year. A year. Biden is on a pace to break that in a little over a month.
Well, Andrew, I mean, brother, Biden has to. He's got to undo all of the 4 years of executive orders of that evil guy, Orange Man Trump. You don't understand.
That's right. Now let's look at where some of these executive orders that he overturned that were Trump's. When we look at them, it's very interesting. Number one, now when you look at the overall actions, Biden has done 13 executive orders dealing with coronavirus. Now, that makes sense. The virus is supposedly this big thing, and Trump supposedly, according to Biden, had no plan there was no plan for coronavirus, and everything Trump was doing was wrong. And Trump had a number of executive orders dealing with coronavirus as well, but out of the 13 that Biden did, only 2 reversed Trump's plans. Mm-hmm. Sounds like what he did was just expand what Trump did. However, when it comes to immigration, there were, I said that wrong. There's 2 coronavirus reversals and 13 new other executive orders dealing with coronavirus. Yeah. When it comes to immigration, out of the 11 total Biden executive orders that were done, 9 of them were focused on overturning what Trump did. In fact, there was an article I read this morning in Arizona where the chief of Border Patrol basically put out a statement saying that they're having a problem at the border, and they're saying this is Biden's problem. They had it under control with Trump. And so now it's a problem, and he's blaming it all on Biden. Why? Because Biden reversed the Trump policy that got it under control. That's the number one thing when you look at this list of reversals, where Biden's focus was on reversing immigration. Why? He wants to take 10 million illegals and make them legal this year and giving them voter rights. He wants all these people coming in at the border and making sure they can vote. You know, one of the brilliant things that people don't really know because it wasn't advertised, back when Barack Obama was president, Barack Obama wanted to pass an amnesty bill. I don't know if you remember this, Bud. He proposed an amnesty bill, and it was going to make citizens of all these illegals in the country. It was interesting because the Republicans back then controlled the House and Senate, and they had come up with a bill that was identical to Barack Obama's bill, except for one thing, just one. Everything Barack Obama said he wanted, they gave it all to him, except for one thing. The people that got amnesty would never be allowed to vote in a U.S. election. No. It went to Barack Obama's desk and he vetoed it. So that tells you the one reason that Barack Obama has his immigration policy. And it's the same thing with Joe Biden. It's the very reason. They're just looking for new voters. That's it. Because if Barack Obama really cared about all these things with the people there that he was wanted to give them amnesty, he would have given it to them. But he didn't want it without their voting rights. That's the thing. And it is interesting. You've probably seen the memes that are going around how the media changes the names. You know, we have the same children that were put in cages under Barack Obama. And those pictures were used to say that this is what Trump did.
Yeah.
And there was a Barack Obama policy. And now that they're arguing for the freedom, and what's Biden doing? He's putting them in the cages again. But now they're family facilities or something.
Yeah. They're welcome centers. They're not cages. They're congratulations, you're here.
Yeah. I mean, all that's changed is the name you call it. It's no, you know, they're now went from children in cages to welcome centers. So, you know, I think that when you look at Biden has done, and just as a comparison, when you look at the other presidents by February 25th, Biden has the lead with 41 executive orders compared to Trump at 24, Obama at 26, and Bush at 7, just to look at the last 4. So Biden has almost double what Trump did in the same time frame. Now, from looking at that, he averaged 55 a year. So he did half of all the ones that he did that first year. And, you know, for the same reason, he undid many of what Obama executive orders did. And I think that executive orders are actually kind of a problem. Executive orders are a way of getting around Congress. And what we see here is that it really does. Yes, the next president can overturn them. And that happens. And that's why you have so many in the first month that these guys would do. And then it slows up. But when Biden made such a big deal of claiming that Trump was a tyrant because of the number of executive orders, and he pales in comparison to Bill Clinton when it comes to executive orders. I think Bill Clinton had 100 more than he did. Obama had more than Trump. So when you look at this, you see that Biden's arguments, I mean, the media is not going to say this, of course, but Biden's arguments that Trump is a tyrant because of this, and yet not so much with him. This is the thing that we have to understand, though, as Christians, is we look at this and we look at it as truth. We have a bearing where we are recognizing things that are true. We have to understand that our culture does not. Our culture doesn't care anymore what's true and what's not. Our culture is looking at what feels right. There's a big difference there. There's a big difference because of the fact that we have the Word of God, something that we stand upon, something that we're going to look at and say, this teaches us everything that we need for faith and practice. This is what we go to. Why? Because we call it God's Word. God has spoken, the creator of the universe, the one who establishes the authorities, those that are in Congress, those that are the rulers over us. God establishes that. So God dictates how we should run things. And we look at this and say we should be standing on truth and justice. And we have people marching on the streets declaring justice as they promote injustice. as they're burning down other people's property, and that's the irony also. They go and oppress other Black people, demanding that they're being oppressed. Who's oppressing them? You are. You're your fellow Blacks when you're burning down their properties. But
that's just another little element of the whole agenda, that there is no private property. Everything needs to belong. I mean, this is a move towards, a socialistic social structure.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that we have a core difference, a major philosophical difference in our culture of how we view things. We as Christians look for truth, justice based on the nature of God.
Yeah.
And our culture is saying we want truth and justice based on the nature of self.
Well, I mean, they're driven by the big three, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life. This is the basis for their agenda. As we read Nadler earlier, God doesn't matter. His will is irrelevant. I think that's why MacArthur in the last week or two, I don't remember which sermon, and I've heard it a couple of times from him, so he's echoed himself with it. He's like, here in America, we're not used to a monarchy. We don't have a monarchy. We do now. We have a king now. And
headed that way.
This whole thing of,
It's headed that way.
Yeah.
This
whole thing of executive orders indicates that. You don't need Congress to legislate. You really don't need the Supreme Court, who is merely legislating themselves. So you manage, you legislate by fiat. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is one where what you end up seeing is it becomes, unfortunately, whether people recognize it or not, it becomes a dictatorship. The problem is with Biden, we don't know who the real dictator is because we don't know who's the one actually pulling the strings when he's awake. And okay, they prop him up, but I mean, you see how he when he gets time to taking questions from a live audience, all the media cuts away. They cut the feed, or it was the White House that cut the feed. Yeah. So let's try to get to one more before we end the show. And I want to deal with this one. This is from the Daily Wire. Boston Public Schools suspend advanced class enrollment test. Say too many students in them are white or Asian.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, you can't have that. In other words, if there's too many people in the advanced class that are white and Asian and they're not Black, that means there must be something wrong with the classroom, right? It's got to be something wrong with them, and not or with the students, not with those that are pushing this cultural agenda. And that's going to be the thing that we see here. So who's being punished by this? You're not promoting the Blacks that they say they want to help. What this is doing is hurting those whites and Asians that are studying hard. Why is it that there's so many whites and Asians? Because you have more whites and Asians promoting education, and you don't have that in Black communities. What's being promoted in Black communities is anything but education right now. So I think that this is an interesting article when it comes to the fact that what we call a minority is no longer what we would think is a minority. But when my kids went to school, went to college, you had a list of things you could get scholarships for. One of the things you could get scholarships for is if you are a minority. If you're in a minority group, you could get scholarships. So both of my kids applied for different scholarships, being that their mother is born in Hong Kong, making her an Asian, which would be a minority, you'd think.
Minority, yeah.
There's less of them here. In two different scholarships, we got rejected, and the reason was Asians are not a minority. And I challenged one of them and said, why are they there? There's fewer of them. Why are they not a minority? The response I got back was, they're smart enough. I was, but minority has nothing to do with how smart you are. It has to do with the numbers, minority versus majority. When you say minority, it should be the fewer people.
Yeah.
And that's not what we see here. So this is more about a political agenda. So what are they going to do? Well, there's obviously too many whites and Asians. 70% of the students that were enrolled in the program were white or Asian, even though nearly 80% of Boston's public school students are Hispanic and Black. And so therefore, we're going to punish those that study hard to benefit those that don't. No, it doesn't benefit those. What it is, it's dumbing everybody down. That's what we see. And as Christians, we should not be looking to dumb people down. We should be looking to lift people up. This is a major difference that I think we need to recognize. And as Christians, I think this is a major thing we need to be looking to promote and to explain to people, is that we are to be people that build others up. We recognize that we're all sinners, but we also recognize we all need God. We need God's forgiveness. And for that reason, we need to be able to stand up on truth. We need to be able to say to a lost and dying world that, yes, you're a sinner, but God made a way of escape. God himself came to a cross and died on that cross that we might be set free. This is the freeing message of the gospel. This is the message that overturns oppression. Have you been oppressed? Every single one of us could say how growing up we've been oppressed in one way or another. And the way you are oppressed doesn't compare to the way I was oppressed. But to me, my oppression is going to be the only one that matters, because that's what I experience. And yours is going to be the only one you experience. So it's going to matter to you. But here's this reality. There's only one way to really, truly overcome the oppression that we grew up with. And that's Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That is the reality. And we have a bunch of people that want to dumb everything down to the lowest common denominator. Why? Very simple reason. It's easier to control them. This is nothing more than what we see in Scripture, that you have corrupt people because they have a sin nature. And what they're doing is they want to corrupt, they want to keep everyone under their control so they can have more power. We know that power in the hands of wicked people is a bad thing. And what Scripture would tell us is, yes, we submit to the government, but the government is there to be a tool of God. And in our country, at least, while we still can, we are supposed to, because we have the right to, hold our government accountable. And that's what we should be doing. We look at all this and we have a couple different reactions that we can have, bud. And this is how we started the show, is the fact that there's far too many Christians that are so focused on the political nature of this, and not the spiritual. I've been saying this for a while. I'll continue to say this, with so many Christians so worried about everything going on politically in the state of this country, the economics, the lockdowns, all this. This is the best time to be alive as a Christian.
Oh, this is a glorious time.
There's no other time, bud. There's no other time like this. There's no other time where people have been in such fear, so worried, and have nowhere else to turn. They know they can't turn to the government. They know the government doesn't have the answers. They're throwing their hands up and they want to overturn the government. That a real insurrection, by the way, overturn the government because they know the government in its current state isn't going to work. And they're like, what do we do? What do we do? Christians, we have the answer. We have the answer for them. The answer is the gospel. And there's nowhere else for them to turn to ignore the fact that this is the truth anymore. We have a glorious time to be alive and share the gospel. And the more we do that, may it be that God will create a revival in this country.
Yeah.
And that there'll be so many Christians that the politicians will pretend to be Christian again just to get elected. And they'll push Christian values again. Because here's a brilliant thing my wife said, Bud, was you look at Disney, they're now canceling the Aristocats and all these others, not just Dr. Seuss. Disney should really cancel Disney. I mean, just cancel the whole thing. Okay. But what are they doing? They're canceling all the things that used to have good, wholesome values, so that the only thing we're left with is their propagandist junk.
Yeah.
They want to get rid of all the stuff that people want and so is wholesome, so that there's nothing left but the junk that pushes their agenda. And that's really what we see going on. So
that agenda could not be more distinct from the truth that we have in the gospel, the truth that we have in Scripture. I mean, I thought last year was just a wonderful evangelistic opportunity. You had a target-rich environment. Go talk to everybody wearing a mask. What are you afraid of? They're afraid of dying. Why are you afraid of dying? Because you know. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to explain the gospel, to give the gospel. There's hope. You don't have to fear death. Death has been conquered. You can be forgiven. So I thought that was a wonderful thing last year. That's spilling over this year as well. But what we really see going on, certainly between the culture and the church, there's a distinction. And within the church itself, the Lord is clarifying. You're quickly able to identify, and I think you're going to be more quickly able to identify the true church from the visible, superficial church. What a wonderful thing! The Lord is pruning His church. It is going to grow. We don't fear the gates of hell are not going to prevail against it. We're called to be faithful, and part of that is understanding we are salt and we are light, and it couldn't be any darker out there. I mean, it's a wonderful time.
It is. It is. And so my encouragement to those of you listening is this: don't get depressed. Don't get upset. Don't be worried. This is a great time to be alive. This is a time for us to share the gospel. And I think that what we're going to find is many of us who do evangelism has found people are more receptive now than I've seen in a long time. You're no longer getting the middle of the road people. I mean, it's really, really clear. You start sharing the gospel, someone either shuts you down really quick or they're receptive. It's no longer where there's that, okay, I'm going to listen and walk away anyway. It really hasn't been. And so this is a great time. It's, to share the gospel and do what God calls us to do. Don't worry about the government. If the government falls apart, the government falls apart. But guess what? We still have Christ. So that would be my encouragement to you. And just as a reminder, to consider, as I mentioned earlier, just promo it again, go to mypillow.com, check out all the products they have. They offer some deep discounts. Just go to the radio listeners page and use the promo code SFE. Not only are you getting great products, you're supporting an American company that is stuff that's made here in America, hires here in America, but you're getting a company that is, if you know anything about MyPillow, he's been under attack because of his conservative views and his support for President Trump. He's been removed from all of the, not all, but many of the retailers. And that's one of the reasons we're working with him now, is the fact that he is finding other ways to get the message out of his products. And that is something that we want to support because, well, we love his products. I love MyPillow. I plan on getting more products. I'm actually, Bud, what I'm planning to do, my wife and I talked about when he came under attack for his conservative values and they started trying to cancel him. My wife and I have decided that we're going to start buying Christmas presents early. And we're probably going to be buying people my pillows for Christmas. And I mean, it's a great time to do it because they're $40 off a pillow right now. So if you want to go and get yours, you can call 1-800-873-0176. That's 800-873-0176. I'll have that in the show notes, and make sure to use the promo code SFE. And you know what, Bud?
Sir?
That's a wrap.
This podcast is part of the Striving for Eternity ministry. For more content or to request a speaker or seminar to your church, go to strivingforeternity.org.